This is 4624.
We are here. I'm so excited. 4624 virtual edition. I don't
Yes.
know. I don't know what we call it, but we are online doing very special segments for this. And brother, it's good to see you.
You too. It's great to see our special guest.
Yeah, so we are here today on 4624, and we have a very special guest joining us, Miss Antonieta Contreras. I'm trying. My friend, some of my friends will call me later and be like, "Why? Just why? We could have helped you do that." But she's a therapist who I actually came across on the Quora network, Quora, if that's how you say that, who's had millions of views as it relates to her very captivating Q&A sessions that she does surrounding trauma. Very well versed in this area, has a new book out, How Deep is the Wound? And is really just such an advocate, if for not anything else, emotional health. So she is here at just the right time as we're healing from here and processing all these emotions that are coming about. I'm making it sound like it has such a nice bow on it, but this thing, Antoinette, is all over the place. Okay. But we are here today to hopefully bring some clarity to people like us who are beginning to process their pain. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So let's get right into it, brother. You just helped me out on this, but
Yeah. So you have a book that's coming out that Elle was sharing. Did you want to speak to us a little bit about the book and what that book is about?
Right. So I have two books. One came 2 years ago, Routledge published it, is the backbone of the neurobiology of trauma. All the things that we need, but without jargon, like very easy to understand what happens inside of us when outside of us is dangerous, right? That, and then I noticed with the time and all the questions that it was necessary to continue talking about trauma, but not from a pathologizing way, and around all the things that happen when our system gets affected or damaged by this threat that we live under. And there are many components that need to be included that are not necessarily what we call trauma, that is too much to put everything in one box. So with the second book, the first is traumatization and its aftermath, and the second is how deep is the wound, because trauma is a wound, it's a very deep wound that can go like all across, all through, like it be the deepest. But in the other side of the spectrum, there are wounds that are very painful and hurt us and make us feel like incapable or overcome many of them that are not necessarily trauma. So I try to organize these concepts and these ideas of the human pain, because I'm going to say something strong here. Pain is inevitable, but trauma is not. So what I want to do is to explain pain without pathologizing every painful experience.
Gotcha.
wow.
Gotcha.
You got to unpack that for us.
Yeah.
Pain is inevitable, but trauma is not.
Mhm.
So you talk a lot about how in society right now, trauma, just using it like, oh, that was trauma to me or whatever, is so widespread that you're saying that it almost seems like it's becoming convoluted. Almost like people are saying they've gone through trauma and really that's not what it is. That's what I'm getting from reading your work. Can you quantify that for me though?
Right. It goes beyond, because it's only not used to talk about pain, it's used to talk about even the events, right? I say, oh, that's trauma because, or a memory, or a situation, or like there, the use of the word is like I call trauma to the fracture. I call the trauma to the knife. I call the trauma to the fall. I call the trauma to the memory of the fall. No, trauma has a lot of elements, but none of the elements is trauma on its own. And sometimes it sounds like that's trauma because I cried, right? Or because I remember, or because I had a nightmare. And we are over pathologizing the human experience.
I agree with you. Some people can get in an argument with their significant other and it's trauma because
Yeah.
didn't agree with them. That's not trauma. You just got in a disagreement and whatever reason you couldn't get on the same page. So I definitely see your point. Now, a person that feels like they have trauma, why should they even talk about it? Like, I'm having a hard time with living my regular life now and moving forward, but looking back in the past about what happened to me back in the mid 80s. And I'm trying to move forward, but I keep on looking back and it's messing me up a little bit. So what are some advantages of dealing with trauma and getting it out?
The most important is that when we didn't know that we had a wound and we never attended the wound, what happens? It gets infected, it goes deeper. The infection can actually affect our kidneys, our liver, our heart, whatever. And then at some point, you want to go back and heal the trauma when in reality is that you are all sick, right? That's what happens when a wound doesn't get attended or cared for. And the damage that we receive for the lack of care, the lack of love, the threat, the punishment, the cruelty, the abuse that we go through, it creates wounds that we don't have the right at some point to mention, to care. We cover them, we forget that they are there, and they rotten, right? That they get infected. And that's what we call trauma is infection, is the aftermath of the events that made the wounds. And sometimes the wounds can be very small, but they can go very deep, right? So we're taking care of, because we need to go back and say, okay, this is closed, this is open, this is bleeding, this is infected. And let's take care of each one of them with the right level of intervention. Right? Instead of saying, oh, I have trauma and now let's put all in one box and I am a victim. No, let's go and separate them and take care of each in order for me to resolve each one the way they need to be resolved.
I like you. Victim mode. So that's me. I have a thing that I don't want to be woe is me, victim mode, because life goes on. So you may be dealing with some situations. People may be like, oh, that's so sad for them, but life still is moving. And while you're still talking about what happened to you, you're missing out on current events that are going on now that could be good for your life, but you keep on thinking about the past, and there's a lot of trauma dumping out there. When I was 5, this happened to me. When I was 3, this happened to me. But that's what I like what me and my sister are doing, healing from here. You got to heal. It's not that these things didn't happen to you, but what are you going to do with them now? Most of the time, the people that cause the trauma, they don't even admit that they caused the trauma to you. Nothing ever happened. So while you're pleading your case, life is passing you by. So that's my challenge. So I do want to deal with it, but I just don't want to stay on that page because I feel like my future is brighter than what my past is.
Very good point. Okay, let's go piece by piece. The same thing that happened to two people, one person may have closed the wound, the other may be bleeding and have an infection with the same event. That's the tricky part of trauma, that every person responds differently because you relate to what happened to you in a different way. You have a very positive attitude. You say, I don't want to be perceived or feel like a victim. Maybe it's because you are not. And the way you related to the events are like, happens. I don't know if I can do bad words, but it happens. Right? And I clean myself and I'm over it. And the other person says, no, what happened to me has stopped me from doing X, Y, or Z. the relationship that the person developed with the event has stopped that system from operating in a regular way. Why do we develop these different relationships? So we have different perspectives, different resiliency, level of resiliency, different teachings, like the teachings that a woman receives versus the teachings that a man receives, the teachings that a white person receives versus not white person receives, etc., 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 makes the difference in how it affects you. And we cannot say, oh, because they are siblings, they have exactly the same problem to resolve. No, each one has a different problem to resolve, right? Maybe she needs consolation. Maybe you need the recognition that you didn't allow that to bend you, whatever that was. So that's why each person needs to be heard and considered not by the event, but by the response to the event and the relationship they develop with it.
So how they've made meaning from it. Now, this is my question. So a lot of times, like my brother is saying, people will say that I am not looking back. I'm not there anymore. Like our community 4624, we don't live at that address anymore. But, and so you might say, hey, I moved forward. I'm older, all of that, right? But what I was seeing in my life was residue from what I had been exposed to during those incidents of my childhood, where in ours, the childhood trauma was abuse in the home. Okay. So, whereas I might know that was a wrong way to behave, now enter my marriage, which is not like that, but I'm still bringing some controls, some exposures I had into that, or I'm guarded or whatever. So I could say, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm beyond it. But my body, my behavior shows that I'm in a lot of ways still right there. So what would you say to that? So to me, you could say, I'm good, which I've said many years of my life, but people around me might say to the contrary. There are some ways that you behave here that are offensive, that are aggressive, that are unhealthy in how I relate to people.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut anybody off. But it's almost like there's alcoholics out there, but they're functioning alcoholics. There are crackheads out there, but they're functioning. They still go to work. So functioning and still dealing with trauma issues. But I want to hear what she has to say about that.
Yeah. So my thing is, for me, processing was good and has been helpful for change in behavior. So I wonder what you say to that.
Okay, very useful for me to introduce like the broad picture of trauma. So let's just start from the beginning. When we are born, we don't have concepts, constructs, words, nothing. We absorb like sponges everything that happens around us. We learn the language. We don't have a language, and we speak the language as if we had a circuit, right? Languages are pretty complex thing, and we learn with even the way we move the tongue and the way we intonate, and not only the words but all the language, right? That's a little bit what happens with our emotional system. We learn from day one who is safe, and what is dangerous. And what we need to do in order to live in that world. We need to learn language to live in, to communicate to those people. Well, there is another language that is the emotional language, that in order to communicate with this person, I need to scream, or I need to be quiet, or I need to punch, or I need to hide, etc., etc. I start learning that from months old, maybe 7, 8 months old, right? And I start, because I need to adapt to this world that I live in, that I came to live in, and depends on the environment is how I'm going to learn to deal with it. Some people, obviously we have temperaments, And some people are more like prone to be sweet, and the others more to be loud, etc., etc. And the combination of those two start developing circuits that are the ones that make us feel capable of deal with our circumstances. First, our parents, right? If my mom is always busy watching TV and the TV is loud, I'm going to have to scream for her to come and change my diaper. And that is what I'm learning. That's the language to communicate emotionally that I have to learn. Go there, then siblings, then whatever, school, environment, friends, neighborhood, everything informs our brain in how we need to behave in order to deal with that world. And so that combination. So if somebody's loud, maybe it's not aggressive, it's just loud. I'm going to be loud like them, learning from them. And then I'm going to learn that in school, in one classroom, when I'm loud, they listen to me. And in the other classroom, when I am loud, they punish me. Right? So now I'm going to have to choose when I'm going to be loud and when I'm not going to be loud. All this is unconscious. All this is our brain working in creating these strategies in how we are going to deal with the world. When there is violence, when there is abuse, then our system gets more concerned. The learning is going to be more acute, much more intense, because the situation in the world is putting me at risk, and the brain is designed not to allow my system to stop working. I need to survive. And if you are threatening my life, whatever that is, I'm going to have to develop like many more alerts and much more effective strategies to overcome the threat, right? The danger. And sometimes it's by submissiveness or by quietness or by shame and hiding. Sometimes it's by punching and hitting and destroying if necessary, right? So that is all in the name of adaptation. So we have to adapt and then we have to survive. And in the survival, if we don't succeed in surviving and we send the message to the brain and all your strategies are failing, then the brain says, then I'm going to take over and I'm going to take control over this nervous system. That means it's regulation. Yesterday, somebody was asking me something very interesting. I said, is it snowing? I'm in Mexico right now, and the Teotihuacan pyramids were covered in ice, like white. Never seen that stuff. And I said, for those that don't believe in global warming, and he says, but global warming is the opposite. It should be very hot, right? I said, no. What it means, global warming, what it means is that now we cannot predict the weather. The system is dysregulated and it's harder to predict if it's going to be hot or cold. That's what happens internally when we are dysregulated. We cannot predict how we are going to respond to the circumstances in order to survive. And sometimes we are going to go extreme into violence or aggression, and sometimes we're going to go extreme into numbing, dissociating, escaping, or whatever else, right? Or getting immobilized. That is what happens with trauma. The brain takes over the control over the system in order to guarantee that it's not going to die. Okay. And that's when you don't have control and you feel like, what is happening to me? I didn't want to scream and I ended up breaking his jaw. Right? Because there is a disconnection between what I want and what my nervous system is doing in order to keep me alive.
Wow.
Right? That is trauma. That is what is called trauma. That is regulation. That's the global warming of the nervous system.
Right. Of our lived experience. So with that said, so we're learning in an environment that is unpredictable, is what I'm hearing from you. So then our actions, our behavior, everything is dysregulated because of the unpredictable nature of how you grew up. So, when do you address that? Should you address that as an adult? Is it important to address? For me, I felt like it was because I was carrying it with me in ways that I didn't even imagine I would. What do you say to clients?
Very well, treatment is long, right? But very right now, I'm telling you, what do you think is more important about global warming? Trying to find which country did the worst damage and because of the use of whatever, or to stop eating meat, or to start having resolutions, like having actions that stop your nervous system from being out of control, right? What you need is to attend your wounds, find which ones are open, which ones are infected, and stop the infection, because the infection at the end can kill you. Knowing who did what is not going to heal you. Discovering that your wounds are open and bleeding and infected is what you need to do. And sometimes we need to go to the root and understand the past to say, oh, wow, that's why I walk like this, because I have a broken bone since I was 2, right?
Mhm.
But who broke the bone and how they broke the bone, and they have to apologize for the broken bone, is not going to make your system get better.
Do you ever heal from trauma?
Me personally, yes.
Can a person that's dealing with childhood trauma, can I ever heal? Is it possible for me to heal or my sister to heal?
Yes, okay. So is it possible to stop the infection?
Yes.
Yes. What is happening, it depends on the number of years that you have carried the infection, is how much this infection has affected your system, right?
Mhm.
Like before it was an infection here, but if you leave that infection for 20 years, you may not have an arm anymore, right? And no, I'm serious. Maybe
Really?
they had to cut your arm at some point to stop
Uh,
the infection, gangrene, or things like that. Are you going to heal from that? No, you don't have an arm anymore, but are you going to allow that infection to continue running into your system? That is the traumatization. Are you going to allow that infection to now kill your legs and your liver, and you may die, right? So it depends. It depends. But if it's an infection and you still have all your arms, you have to take care of the infection, and then all the other things that got affected by the years that you carried that infection.
Type of infection can also infect others. It can infect your relationships, your business
because
partnerships.
it's an infection, right?
But this is a unique infection because a lot of people, they don't even want to deal, they don't even want to be in a relationship with anybody that
But
came.
that's part of the consequences, because it's not only internal, it's also external. And there are infections. There are
Mhm.
infections that are not only personal, but the whole house can feel infected, right? The whole house can be rotten, like the atmosphere, the vocabulary, the things that happen in the house. But let me go back to your sister's question about the attachment wound. So if you grew up, if you were born in a house where there was no regulation, there was no love, there was no attention, there was no way to connect and regulate, your system is going to be affected from day one. And that is the most important thing to learn. You are not going to get attached to your parents. No, they didn't attach to you. Forget about that. But learn, teach your system to find regulation and to find some secure attachment, even if it's to yourself or to God or to your religion, a place where you feel safe and that your nervous system can calm down and say, I'm not dying. Not everybody is an enemy, right?
Wow. This is good. I have a question. This is so good. We could keep going. We're almost at our time. I got my one question. Do you want to go first, brother? I got 2 questions and then I'm done. You
All
can
right,
go.
don't forget your question now.
Okay.
So you hit on to something. So in our situation, my sister was 4 years old when I left the house, and I was 10 years old, and I never returned. So she was still in the house with the infection.
Mm-hmm.
So Tell me, how do you see that playing out? I had attachment to her father, which was my stepfather, but I looked at him as pops. And my mom, I still have that attachment to her because
Mhm.
that's mama, right? So how do you think that plays out into, or it can play out into my relationship or how I am now, in comparison to the two? 'Cause
Okay, so let's start like by making a distinction between a bond and an attachment. Okay, attachment is a technical question
Mm,
that talks about the first year, the first very beginning of life, in how our systems connect. My mom and me connect and regulate with each other. We learn 10 months or 11 months after we are born, but because we walk straight and the human brain is so big, we are born premature, really, right? So we need to learn to continue maturing the basics in the chest of our mother, let's imagine.
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
when that doesn't happen, not it's only physical, but in terms of my mom is not regulating, my mom may be even rejecting me emotionally. Why do I have this baby? I didn't want to have it, right? Then the nervous system doesn't continue maturing. And that baby feels completely abandoned and not finding a place in the world. That is the worst trauma, that wound, deep wound that you can start life with, because your nervous system never matured enough to find safety because your mother didn't provide it. This is an unconscious safety, right? The bond that we create with mom and dad, that's a different thing. That's not a technical word that says, yeah, I feel affinity with my mom more than with my dad, or I feel love or care for her. That's a different thing that doesn't have much to do with the nervous system the way attachment does. Okay? You left, lucky you, right? Or brave you, or bravo, or whatever. Your survival strategy was flee, get out of here, and better being alone than being infected, right? Your sister had to stay there. What happened to her? I don't know. I don't know enough to know how she handled it and what strategies she had to continue developing in order to stand abuse and to continue growing up. Because the good part is when you caught yourself, what happens there? Like the infection just rarely happens. What
Mhm.
happens is that the body is working really hard in closing that opening, and at some point it's going to be closed. And there is a scar, but the body did everything possible to close it, right? So let's call it resiliency. It's not resiliency, but it's the natural tendency of the system is to heal. It's
Mhm.
moving into the body is not interested in being sick, because actually that's the opposite of surviving, right? If you stay sick, you die. So the body is going to try to heal you. I don't know how much Michelle's system tried to heal her. I don't know what strategies she could have developed in order for her to continue living and stay afloat, right?
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah. It was safety first for me. My brother, when it came to the abuse, he was physically impacted. I mean, physical abuse, him and my mother. I was more like a witness of these things, but not a direct hit to those things. So, as a witness and staying in there, whatever it was going to take to keep the environment calm, then that's what I was going to try to do. Whether it's figuring out how to communicate with you, getting ahead of what might trigger you. I feel like I was under extreme amount of stress even as a child, always trying to be a step ahead. If I know you're going to be triggered by not making good grades, I'm going to always try to make the best grades. Or if I know I should clean up and have everything in order before you even say it, then that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm always thinking, but of course, that is not just a 100% cure, because then it could be something else that triggers the person that you did. So I was always dancing around in a minefield of what could have turned into an explosion at any time. So my stress is always up. My cortisol is fluctuating, because when I do find out and I get it right, I'm like, yes, I made it. When I don't, I'm like, oh, how did I not see that? So my whole thing was a dance the whole time to try to stay safe and try to find the good. It's got to be some good, even though it was surrounded by a lot of bad. I would try to find good. So that was just my thing in being in the environment, just by default, being way younger.
I can tell you that I have had clients that who had lived in violent environments. One became so used to it that didn't stress and the cortisol didn't go up at all. Like, whatever, that's how my parents are, whatever. And then another case, like being completely afraid of every scream, and every system is different.
Yeah. So my question was this in our time here: how do you know you're infected? I love your example of infection. And you're like, it depends on how many years. How does a person know they're infected?
Well, you go immediately to regulation and see if that person can tolerate things, if that person has some control, some awareness, some break, or if it has gone completely. When you are really infected, there are many other manifestations. The person is ill, maybe physically, like medically, have illnesses, have other symptoms that are connected to the imbalance in the stomach. The stomach is one of the symptoms of people that have been dysregulated, that maybe they are not anymore. The stomach issues are one of the main indicators that there had been dysregulation. Dysregulation, again, not eternal. The body is going to try to find regulation, otherwise it will die. But at some point, you have to develop tolerance. You have to understand your emotions. You have to understand your responses. And if you have awareness, if you can say, oh, this is happening, or completely losing it, and then 2 hours later coming with the guilt and the, I don't know, sorry, I couldn't. Those people are sometimes dangerous, right? Sometimes they are dangerous to themselves or to others, because when they lose the capacity to regulate their emotions, they can really do bad things, or impulsivity that are not only harming others, but doing forbidden or illegal things. And they don't have the capacity to have the awareness that's happening, right? Because the impulse is to, so that is an immaturity that is probably significant sign of a delay on the development of the prefrontal cortex. It's not that easy, but you have to see the whole thing and how dysfunctional this life is. When the person is not dysfunctional and is only probably relational, right? We all have problems with relationships. There may be many wounds that are not trauma, that are connected to the adaptation, that didn't learn to adapt, didn't learn how to navigate the world correctly, and therefore making many mistakes, having a lot of insecurities. That's a different thing, and that's what I talk about in the second book, than trauma. Trauma has to do with the body, the whole system getting sick, right? Emotional wounds that are not survival is still very inconvenient for living life if we don't learn how to adapt and do things better and find the meaning on the situation, and not taking everything personal, and not like believing, if you have a victim mentality that everybody is like against you and things like that, you may not be afraid, but you may not have the motivation to do anything. Right? That may be more connected to insecurity and problems of lack of love and lack of connection than lack of safety.
I like what you said, just as we close, and my brother will, I know he'll have some closing to say too. But I like what you said about if you cut the arm, the body immediately is rushing to get the healing. Like, we are pre-wired. It is our design to heal. I would like to speak to that. That's a physical wound we're talking about. But emotionally, I do believe as well that we were designed to heal, not to stay like we are. I know you speak about that in your book somewhat, giving people practical breathing exercises and things like that.
Right.
We can heal.
We can.
We're
can.
pre-wired to do that. So I'd love for you to speak to that.
If we accept that pain is inevitable, because if we want to get rid of pain, like forever, and discomfort and hurt, like, yeah, then maybe not. because it's also in our nature. Our skin is thin. I take this pick and I will hurt it, right? We are not made out of iron, and we will get wounded many times. What we need is to understand it and make sense of it, accept the lesson of the wound, and move on, as you were saying, Ed. Move on. Okay, what did I learn? Okay, that you should not mess up with this thing, right? Because they get really hurt, and then they will not love you, and then that will hurt you. Okay, so maybe that's the lesson, right? Or I should be more careful, or I should be more this or less of that. And then you adjust, and then you adapt better to your circumstances, and then it flows smoother, and then you don't hurt as much, right? But if you don't learn the lesson and you continue doing the same thing that hurt you again before, then you will continue being in pain.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Brother, before as we get ready, I know you just heard listen to the whole thing.
Part is the part that got me. I was told that there's a list of medical issues you can have as a result of trauma. Your point, trauma is you can turn on the TV and something triggers you, and that's automatic trauma to you. I don't know. I just appreciate we can go on and on. Some people may just say it's just so much and it's always going to be trauma. So that's the reason why you need God. You lean on God.
That's where we are.
It's always going to be, you get rid of one trauma, or you feel like you cure one ailment, and another wound comes. You know what I mean? So it's always going to be something. And so that people don't just give up, because a lot of people are just giving up because of trauma.
Because of the narrative of trauma, not because of trauma, but because the belief that they have put on in our head that if we have trauma, then we are lost.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. I pride myself. I have my issues. Don't get me wrong, but I think I function good in chaos, because that's all I known since I was a child was chaos. I could be getting laid off from a job, and other people are like, "What am I going to do?" And I'm like, "Find another job." So it's almost, in a way, it's a gift and it's a curse. But I learned earlier that the world is ever changing, and you can't trust anything because it can change in the blink of an eye. So some people have learned to just function good in chaos.
Well, I would put it in a different words. We live in the jungle, right? So we should learn how to deal with the spiders and snakes instead of saying, "Oh my God, there are snakes and spiders. I won't go out of my house and I won't deal with anybody because it's dangerous," right?
Right.
No, learn to go into the trees and learn that, yes, the world is dangerous and there is threat everywhere, but there is also many beautiful things to enjoy and to look for. And it's beautiful. If you think in the jungle, it's fantastic. Many people pay for a vacation in there.
Yeah. So you make the most out of it.
Right. Because the tendency is for harmony. The tendency is for balance. The tendency of the world is not for chaos. We can organize it. We can get rid of the danger. We can find harmony.
Yes. And I want to make sure we show people how they could contact you. That's your website. They can find out all about you, all about those books. And so you see the website there on the screen. And of course, to follow our community and just to hear talks like these, we're at 4624.substack.com, also on TikTok, 4624 Healing From Here, and YouTube, 4624 Healing From Here. Antonieta, I appreciate you. We appreciate you.
Thank you
so much for sharing and just being here with us. I will take away that when a cut happens on your arm, the body is rushing to just do what it needs to do to
Yes.
see that close up.
And then
that-
what do you need to do?
oh,
If
yeah.
your arm cuts, what do you need to do? The body is going to do its work if you help it. How do you help your body to do its work?
We got to get involved.
Clean it, cover it, protect it. Forget about who caught you. Take care of your cut.
That's it.
Seemed like a long time ago, 4624. Let me take you down this road. I just want my story told. I just want to break the mold. Trauma healing unfold. This is my story. What's your story? Turn the camera on you. Tell your story. He brought you to it. Can bring you through it. He had his hands on my life. God, won't he do it? This is my story. What's your story? Turn the camera on you and tell your story. He brought you to it. Can bring you through it. He had his hands on my life. God, won't he do it?